All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone, to the last session of MCN. Thank you so much for coming. This is Skyways Bridging Silos, Content and Production Strategy for a Cohesive User Experience. So there's been some discussion already that I've heard at this conference about even the word content and what does that really mean? Well, in the case of this presentation, we're thinking of it as all-encompassing. So content is really the raw building materials, and it's also the products that we as museums are creating and putting out there for the public. So, you know, more and more museums are producing lots and lots of stuff. We're pushing out all these things over all these different channels. And the tools for creating those things are becoming easier for everyone to use. So the job is spreading across many different departments. It's not just a museum technologist doing a digital product anymore. And so we're really looking at, you know, with all those people creating, how do we work collaboratively across all of the silos to really establish best practices around quality, design, and usability so that we end up with more of a cohesive public user experience rather than varying levels of user experience with polished products and maybe some not so quite so polished. But at the same time, balancing staff autonomy. And also, we're looking at how do we develop systems internally for kind of an internal public or internal user experience for processes, systems, and tools for staff to even know what content your institution has, or, you know, without relying on individual or institutional memory, and then actually adopt and use those systems. And then lastly, of course, there's staff roles. How do we actually clarify, you know, who's doing what across all these departments as it's being diversified? So our panelists today are probably not going to claim to have it all figured out, but we're each going to talk from our own institution's perspectives on what we're doing to address these challenges. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex.
All right. Let's see, what do I need? Okay, so you'll pick me up when I run out.
Yep.
Okay. Hey everyone, thanks for coming. Let's see, I guess we'll stick with that for now. So I'm Mia's content strategist. I by no means strategize all content at Mia. I really focus primarily on being the kind of linkage between our curatorial staff members and kind of the rest of the museum, and kind of get everybody sort of in train and working with one another. And so I live in the curatorial division of my museum, and I'm very lucky to have coworkers like Meaghan Tongen, who lives in other areas to kind of be a partner with on establishing some level of integration in terms of content and workflows and delivery. And so I guess what I want to talk about today are sort of two different working groups that we've put together that we felt we needed to put together at various times in the past couple of years, and with different goals in mind, with different players at different levels of the organization, and just to kind of walk through what we did, maybe why we did it, and what some of the results were. It all arose out of the problem I think all of our institutions are facing, which is a proliferation of content and channels, content channels. And so the first group is the, oh boy, that slide is very light. Can you all see that? Okay, I should have made it darker. So the first group I want to talk about is the Communications Working Group, which was started in the fall of 2013 and actually wrapped up its work the following winter, 2014. And really the purpose of the Communications Working Group was purely to focus on the execution and delivery of the content that we were delivering, pushing out. And so basically to establish effective workflows, to eliminate redundancy, if media technology, our kind of digital side of things is doing one thing and print is doing the same thing, well, why aren't they working together? That sort of thing. And because we were really focusing on sort of delivery and execution, the people who populated that working group were the deliverers, really. It became, so basically people from marketing, from design and editorial, media and technology, curatorial, and visitor and member services, but all people who are in the position of taking content that exists and kind of routing it through our various content channels. And so it became, it met bi-weekly, so once every other week, and it became just really a place to raise questions about kind of best practices, issues related to content creation, sharing, and publishing. And if nothing else, if at its most kind of basic function, it established some heightened level of cross-divisional communication, that in and of itself was a goal. But I'm happy to say that it actually achieved a lot more, including things which may seem very simple, but which are profoundly important to the visitor experience at our museum. So, for example, we have a newly renovated lobby, which many of you probably enjoyed earlier this week. And we have now additional screens. And so, of course, when you have screens, you have to have content on them. So the decision was, well, what should go on them, and who gets to make that call, and how does it kind of happen? And so, as you can imagine, everybody had lots of ideas for what goes on those screens. And so, I'm not going to tell you what we ended up deciding to do with them, but more importantly, this is the type of thing that this group was perfect at facilitating. New channel, okay, what goes on it, right? And what's the kind of framework for deciding how long things remain, for recycling new content, and so on. Equally, just kind of general alignment over sort of timelines for promotion of exhibitions, what goes on the website, what takes priority, what goes where, for how long, who does that. So again, kind of, real kind of practical, extremely important workflow issues that happen kind of at that envelope between the organization and the visitor. And then equally, sort of questions about editorial workflow and web copy. We moved our website into WordPress, and what that helped really do was it allowed us to move to a different model of content generation and implementation that was much more lateralized across divisions, so that the people on the communications working group who were tasked with putting content on the website could do so, and that oversight would be relatively more straightforward and centralized. It was no longer funneled through one division. Actually, before I go forward, and so it allowed us to kind of do things like this, which is our MIA stories. It's our official. Well, we're not supposed to call it a blog, but it's basically a blog. But this happens to be a blog that our editor Tim Gearing wrote, and he crafts many of these. But the vision for the blog is that it would have many contributors, and that the number of steps that would take from somebody crafting an entry and actually having it published would be radically reduced. And I think that's actually happened quite nicely. But ultimately, the kind of deliverable that we presented was this matrix, which is our content communication strategy document. Some of the things are a little bit, and I see it kind of didn't really render very well in the text, unfortunately, but I'm sure we'll be happy to share this with anybody who would like it. But as you can see, it kind of breaks things down in order of sort of importance based upon the priorities that we've set as an institution, the available channels to distribute information about it, and kind of how things line up in terms of what channels we use for various things. And so I'm an art historian, I want a pointer, but I'll just kind of use my finger. On the far left, we have our traveling exhibitions. These are exhibitions that are ticketed, so they're a revenue generator for us. We sink major resources into their production, both human resources and budgetary resources. And so, needless to say, that's our hero that we push out. And then it kind of goes from there. I wouldn't overgeneralize and say that from left to right you see kind of a diminution of prioritization, but in a way you kind of could read it that way. And then the one kind of interesting column that gets many of the same channel options that are targeted, that our ticketed exhibitions get is what we call trends and opportunities. So these are things which may not rise to the level of ticketed exhibition, but we see as really important signposts, both internally and externally, for the direction that we're heading as an organization, or equally might fall more under the category of kind of zeitgeist things, which we know will generate intense interest at the audience level, and that we really wish to augment in terms of how we push them out to people. So that's the content communication strategy. This working group did its job and dissolved once this was produced, and now this is really our kind of standard for how we approach other projects. And I guess I would say the experience that we had with this group, and Meaghan I would really invite to comment as well, because she was instrumental to this, is that this kind of boots on the ground, go with the people who are actually doing that type of work first, was really helpful. Because on the one hand, it was very granular in terms of the question we were asking, but it was set within a very holistic context. And I think that balance was actually very powerful. So now I kind of move on to a different standing team that we were actually in the kind of infancy of. We've met maybe 4 times over the past 4 months, and that's the content team. And really the goal of the content team is that the people involved are different from those who are involved in the communications working group. These are people who are, I like to joke, it's kind of like the middle manager club. These are people who are tasked with taking the vision set by leadership team and translating it into the content that we produce and the kind of functions that we play as a museum with a visitor-centric focus. And so, in other words, these are people who maybe aren't crafting strategy per se, but they're certainly shaping it and making decisions about how it's implemented, what tactics are used to implement it. And so the membership of that includes myself, as well as our marketing manager, our head editor and writer, the heads of public programs and interpretation, our brand communication strategist right there, head of interactive media and media and technology project coordinator, which is Meaghan. And we meet once a month, and at its most basic, it's kind of like the communications working group. It's just a place to kind of share information. Well, what are you working on now? But more importantly, it's an opportunity to to do what I just said, to kind of align around a stated strategy for the museum and work together on amplifying the workflows that we have and the work that we do and the content that we produce so that it's most effective. And the project, how much time do I have? Just a couple more minutes? Okay. So the project that we're taking as our guinea pig is this one, which is to enliven our period rooms. We have 13 historic interiors, 1 standing structure, which is a Prairie School architecture house here in town. And over the course of 3 years, the goal is to revitalize these spaces, make them meaningful to contemporary audiences through all sorts of different tactics, and to work with partners that you see here on the left, our curatorial team, outside academics, artists, community members, to either do radical insertions or to create courses around these, to do all levels of programming, everything from creating a Jane Austen reading room to having sock darning classes in the Connecticut room. And so the challenge really, that's the fun part, that's the easy part. The challenging part for us is how to kind of get our arms around all the activity that we're doing, define it for our audience so they understand kind of the context in which this action is happening, and then communicate that outward to our audience in ways that they both grasp and find exciting, but then also to think about other audiences that we have. There's been a stated aim to have in the near term a community audience, but in the long term to have all this documented and have evaluation of the projects be documented and readily available to our peers in other museums. So how do we kind of fulfill both goals and take something which is very diffuse and make it in a way more tangible to all parties involved. And we also have a number of stakeholders in terms of who's funding all of this. So it's kind of a large, complex issue that involves a lot of inside and outside individuals and contributors. And it's very easy to fall into this feeling of being trapped by an old house hurtling towards a nightmarish conclusion. And this is how I feel at kind of 3 in the morning. But we're taking kind of baby steps, and we have a website. That's a good start. And so really what this group was charged with is helping think through how to translate this very diffuse project into something that's much more tangible and which will kind of last as legacy content well after our projects are over. So that's all I got. Should we move on through?
Thanks, Alex. I think I'd echo and reiterate some of Alex's points that I think it's really important to note that the communications working group came to an end. I think we start a lot of these teams, and I'm on several teams with Alex. I'm really fortunate to be in this group of people who both have a stake in the strategy, but then also are implementers. But I think having that moment where you can say, this team has served its purpose and we no longer need to meet is a hard thing to do, and for some reason we feel like we need to continue these meetings. So I challenge all of you to take that moment and say, why are we meeting? And have we met the goals of this conversation? So that's a good place to start. So I want to talk a bit about tools. I think team is one thing and having those communications, but then what are the processes and tools that we're using to support and align our strategies? I must have been thinking about this panel the other night before I went to sleep, because I woke up with a start, and I honestly had this image in my head, and I said, this is it. Like, this is what it feels like to have all these different initiatives and projects and things that are happening. It's, you start spinning one plate, and you go on to the next, and the next, and the next, and you're just hoping and wishing that you can get back to that first one before it drops. And, you know, we all have lots of content, and we have lots of spinning plates, and it's not going to change. We're cultural organizations that are creating great things. But what are the workflows and tools we can establish that can make life easier? And so I'd like to share some of the tools that we're rolling out at MIA to really improve our process and better align. So before I dig into this diagram a bit, I'd like to jump back to the fact that WordPress is our web CMS. We've been doing that for about 2 years, and all of the departments have a stake in it. So every department has an author, and they own their content, and it's been such a breath of fresh air for our web team not to be updating every single event post and exhibition post and new content and pages that come along. So I think that aspect, but then a technical component of that is that our team actually built a plugin for editorial workflow. So it bounces to an editor whenever a change is made. And one of the shifts we made is that the editor was getting every single change that was made, and at one point said, I can't. And so we did something sort of scary and has completely turned out. Once a post is published, the original author can edit it without approval. And it's been fine. So I would encourage that. You know, it's this huge opportunity to really kind of relinquish some of that control and also allow the content providers and producers to really own their content. So getting this process in place was really what I see as one of the biggest achievements of that communications working group that Alex mentioned. Having all those people in the room, we came to those decisions, and that was really powerful for moving forward. So this diagram, just a brief introduction to kind of where this all comes from. Some of you may have heard about this at the conference or at other conferences. We have the Enterprise Content Management Project at MIA, and essentially it's an IMLS-funded grant. We had about 3 years to complete this project, and it's evolved quite a bit over that time. So the ECM project, the guiding principles have remained the same, and that is to maximize our resources. So we know that content creation is valuable work, and everyone is doing it. So how do we not be redundant and actually make use of that in multiple channels? We want to store it and store it effectively. So how do we make a one-stop shop that all of our content consumers can find the assets without making phone calls? And how do we share it? We want to make it really easy to access, really easy to use, and also to be self-service. So MetaMia is a unified search across all of our internal source systems. It is self-service in the fact that it's browser-based, and it can be accessed through your network credentials, so there's no password to remember outside of that. And then a really core component is that this would be flexible and open. We didn't want to lock all of our content and our assets into these proprietary systems. So getting away from an enterprise DAM and moving into an open source DAM and allowing us to have some control and also to share this as a solution because it's open source and it's on GitHub, and we'd be happy to talk with you about it if you're interested in looking into that too. So to point out, we have these assets. They live in these systems: TMS, MediaBin, WordPress, and ResourceSpace. ResourceSpace is our new one. This is a screenshot of kind of what the visitor experience is, or the user experience is. And we have a small group of staff that have access to ResourceSpace. Really, it's just the content creators. So it's about 20 to 25 people that can upload into the system. And the goal of that is that they finish a project and they make a PDF and they put it in ResourceSpace so that other people can find it. And so it's not living on their desktop. Again, it's an open source DAM. We really needed a home for those final public-ready assets that didn't fit in our other systems. MediaBin is for images, but where are we putting video? Do we have the room to put video in those spaces? This is all on Amazon, so we're using relatively inexpensive storage as well. Videos, audio, so we can have all of our audio exhibitions in here and then pull them onto the website really in a slick way. Graphics, and PDFs of final projects. So it's kind of this home for things that maybe would have lived in a file share or just been on local storage. So having that opportunity to say, this is important work that you created and we want to be able to find it. So let's put it in a place that we can all share it. The team selected ResourceSpace, and we had a contractor work with us for about 6 months to customize this. And it's a free system, pretty incredible. And he customized it through the API. We already really like the clean user interface, the clean, really clear management of assets, versioning, and the fact that it's infinitely extensible with plugins. So we can really grow with this and continue to benefit from that user community. So we're now in the process of getting these workflows streamlined. This is going to be the hardest part. And when this project is completed, ultimately we'll have all these final assets uploaded at the moment that they're created and made accessible to all staff through MetaMia. So with ResourceSpace as our new source system and MetaMia, which is our unified search across all source systems, we have this opportunity to say, I want to look for this one thing. I don't know where it lives. It might be in ResourceSpace or TMS or on the website, I'm not sure, but I can search for it and either drill down by source system or search across all. So really, this is going to be as robust as we get our content creators to fill it, but we're off to a good start. And so some of the aspects of this, I can give a little bit of a tour, and I'd be happy to follow up with any of you on this as well. We have lots of filtering options. There's lots of ability to drill down. I think one of the biggest benefits is that you don't have to go to the source system, which might require that individualized training, or you might not even have access to it. But that ability to look at something or to search for something in a more consistent way across all systems has been really huge. So this might include, digital images from MediaBin, which live, collection objects, events, gallery views, graphics, stock photos, all of those things, making them more available in a broader search. So the real goal here is just searching, saving, and sharing. Within the search system, there's a cart, and so you can save things to your cart, and you can send that cart to colleagues. So you can say, I did this search. This is going to be the assets that I want you to plug into this product, and it's ready for you to go. And then there's also an advanced search. So at the system level within MetaMia, you can break it down by those custom metadata fields. So it gets very granular very quickly. And ultimately, it was designed with kind of lots of familiar products in mind. So we wanted it to feel like a Google search. And we wanted it to feel like Pinterest and how they break apart the search terms. There's lots of things that we borrowed from to make it really friendly and familiar, and hopefully without a lot of need for training. But this is just one of those views that you really can dig into it as well. So that's what we've been working on. And I'd be happy to share and talk about it more. There's a whole team related to this project that would be very advanced in terms of what they could share with you. And we're just hoping to have some solutions and really create this one-stop shop for our content, and hoping that that will support all the other things we're doing. Thank you.
Set a timer. Are you going to tell me? Okay. Just do that. Hi guys, I'm Mandy Kritzeck from the Corning Museum of Glass, where I'm the digital content specialist. So today I'm going to talk to you about my web power user group, which both of these guys from MIA have touched upon decentralizing web content management, letting your staff into your CMS and making their own updates, and it's really great. I highly encourage it, and I'm going to talk about how it works for us, how it doesn't work. So at the Corning Museum of Glass, we have many silos, and I wasn't going to say that. I was going to like joke about how, just kidding, there are departments, but actually, you know, they kind of are silos. We have an entire hot glassmaking team. We have a glassmaking studio. We have a library. A lot of things are going on in different places that a lot of people don't know about. So one of the ways that we're working to bridge past that is by getting more people involved with our digital projects, and then seeing what can come out of that and what ideas are coming out of that. So we have this setup where staff from every department are working in the website and in digital projects. And I'm going to switch to the next slide. So the power users not only manage content in their areas, but they also provide feedback based on what they hear from our users and visitors to the museum and to the website. And so this provides really great opportunities for improvements, because if we hear their feedback, not just from what we know about what our web analytics say, or you know, what we see in the stats, it's what we're hearing from the front line, it's what we're hearing from our research librarians. So because they're involved in updating the website, they're better able to give us that feedback. They kind of more understand the systems and what we can and can't do. And so I'm going to share a quick example of how it works when we have our web power users managing their own content. And this has been the most successful case study for us with power users is with our digital signage. So by actively being engaged in the content every day, they've been able to make really great suggestions for content improvement. I think my next slide, yeah. So in 2013, we launched digital signage across the museum campus. So we have daily live glassmaking demonstrations, and all those demo times are displayed on screens in the gallery, as well as live on our website and in the new Glass app. Glassapp.cmog.org is my side plug. And so because it's on all those different places and because it's happening daily and things often change, we needed a way to manage all of this content. So the power users in this area can publish updates to the schedule unmoderated so that rapid changes can be made. They don't need to email someone from the web team. They don't need to wait for their time change to be published. They can just go in and change it. So Meaghan was saying that it was very freeing to have staff members be able to edit their own content. For us, it was necessary. We just don't have enough people on the web team to be able to constantly make these updates as often as they need to be made. So it's with the digital signage for the demos, but also our cafe manager is making daily updates to our cafe menu. So if the soup sells out, they can update it right away. So Regina, so this is the glassmaking schedule. And Regina is our frontline manager, and she's going in and she can add a new hot glass making demonstration at any time. And so our CMS is Drupal, and we do have different things set up for different people. So I was saying that for these demo schedules, they can make the changes unmoderated. That doesn't work for every section. There are staff members that will go in and edit more other content areas, and some of them are just uncomfortable publishing it. They want it to be moderated, so we have it set up that those go through a workflow. But really, like what we've worked with Regina, where they understand that it's beneficial for them to just be able to be 100% responsible for their content, she's learned the value of having that responsibility, and so it's worked out really well. And she's enlisted other frontline staff to be trained in the system as well, so that more people then are able to make those rapid updates. So this shows an example of how many demos are happening throughout the day. And this is just the back end view. So once she makes a change, it's published right away. She can check it right here, doesn't have to walk out through the galleries, and can double check. So a really great example of where we've heard feedback from the power users is in translating our cafe menu. So we have a high percentage of visitors that come by tour bus to the Corning Museum of Glass that are Chinese speaking. For at least since before I've been there, which is over 5 years, they've been translating the hot glass demos into Mandarin. We have staff that are fluent speakers, so guests can ask them questions afterwards about the glassmaking process. It's fantastic for these guests. They can also get translated maps when they arrive at the museum. So one thing that our power users noticed was that they were going into the cafe, and that's one area that didn't provide the translations. And they said, you know, it would be great if we could add the Chinese translations to our cafe menu. And because of that idea, we thought, of course, that makes so much sense, we'll add it right away. So here you can see the yellow dates mean that the cafe menu has been overridden. So our power users are in there every day making updates to the cafe menu. So here's what really works about, that was the one example, and here's what really works about having the power user manage their own content in that area, is they've adopted the creation of the menus as a part of their daily process. So I think that's one of the main reasons why these two areas especially work, is that they're in there every day. They don't need the constant retraining. And then the fact that they're allowed to make immediate updates and changes without it being moderated is really great for them, because they're getting that immediate value of being able to edit their content. And like I said, it doesn't work in every instance, but if you can let go of that control, if you don't have to run it through your communications department or editor, I highly encourage it. And then because the power users are, in this instance and in many other places, they're interacting with our visitors, they're getting that feedback about, in this case, our digital signage, but also for some, it's our website or our mobile app. They're hearing that feedback and can pass it on to us. And them being invested in working with the technology is, I think it's helped us get more feedback than it's just like, oh, someone's complaining about the mobile app. If they're working in the mobile app, they're more invested in figuring out how to fix the problem, instead of just saying, web team, can you take care of this, please? And then in this instance, the web power user is feeling that their increased workload of having to go into Drupal and make the change is actually, it outweighs the benefit of managing their content outweighs the increased workload. So I wanted to also address the challenges of working with power users. It's not a perfect system, and here are a few things that we've learned over the past couple years. So in the instance where power users aren't working in Drupal frequently enough, they need constant retraining. And a colleague this week asked me, is it worth it if they're only making contents every couple weeks, every couple months? Is it worth it to keep retraining them in Drupal and having them work directly in the systems? And thinking about it, I would say yes, because I really think that having that hands-on interaction with the digital programs or in the CMS helps them get that better understanding of what can and can't be done, and then make better recommendations for improvements and better recommendations based on the feedback that they're getting from our visitors. So some other challenges are if the power user feels reluctant to work in the system, which just takes a lot of, again, training from the web team to help them understand what they can and can't do in the CMS and figure that out. And then if they're not actively making updates in their area, they might just say, oh, web team, the date on that event is wrong, can you change it? And, until it's like the day of the event. And then that immediacy will cause a little bit of panic. And we've had that happen in some instances where we ask them to update their own content and it gets pushed off. There are also power users who don't consider web content to be a part of their job responsibilities. And that's where what I'll talk about is one of the ways that we've worked with that is being a power user is actually a part of that staff's formal job description. So then it becomes a part of their job, and as a part of the web team, myself and other people on the team are helping them figure out how they can incorporate it into their daily practices. 1 minute, oh no. Okay, how are we addressing them? I'm not gonna read through the whole slide then, because we'll go through these really quickly. So onboarding, like Alex was talking about having staff members write for their blog. We call it a blog freely. It's a good entry point for people to get engaged with digital content or writing blog posts gets them involved in a CMS, so they write it in WordPress. And then also, we'll even accept if a staff member wants to send us a photo that they took of something happening at the museum to post on our Instagram. We share in their excitement to contribute to anything digital, and that's a way of getting them involved. And starting from the top down and making it a priority, so here's the objective that's added to a power user's job description. And then developing confidence through collaboration. So it takes a lot of collaboration between the web team and the staff, retraining, training some more, and just keeping those lines of communication open. And then acting upon suggestions and feedback that the power users give has been a really great key point. If they're just saying, hey, since I've been working in the system, I have these ideas, but then you don't act on them, they're less likely to continue being as involved. And then helping staff think digitally. So helping them see how being a power user can be incorporated into their way of work. And the digital team will answer any question related to anything digital, whether it's related to the project that we're working on or not. And it's just a part of the process, is helping the staff think about how they can incorporate digital into their way of work. So a little bit of the timeline to wrap up was we created the power user group in 2011. In 2014, just last year, is when we formed a formal digital media department. And then as of this year, we're forming a digital projects committee that any new projects will be filtered through. So we're kind of doing more with digital at Corning Museum. The Glass app, which launched in March, was our first major digital project that had a cross-departmental interpretation team. And I think that having the staff as power users and knowing a bit about our digital processes was a key part in making that group come together. And the power user group is the first step of leadership really supporting that all staff make digital as a part of their process. So here's my contact information if you guys have any questions, and thank you.
Hello, I'm Jim Ockuly, and I manage the web department at the Minnesota Historical Society, which is a group of 7 of us, plus usually an intern and partnerships throughout the organization. I think I'm going to talk, if not double speed, at least 1.5 speed, so we could maybe have some time for conversation in the end. But I'm also going to do a little background on the Historical Society. We're unique in a lot of ways. We're not a single site art museum like so many organizations here are. I'm going to start with real big history, the history of Minnesota in 5 easy milestone steps. This is the North American content in prehistory. Outlined there, right in the middle of the glaciers, is the future state of Minnesota. There's the rise of the first people, Dakota and Ojibwe. These are links to articles in our online encyclopedia, Minneapolis, with nice overviews of those things. By the late 1600s, Europeans started coming and exploring. And then in 1849, the Minnesota Historical Society was established. What's interesting is that 9 years later, Minnesota became a state. So we work for an organization that's older than the state it's here to preserve, or whose history it's here to preserve. So that gives you a little idea of how long this place has been around. Another unique thing about it is its size and shape. So there's the Minnesota History Center, which is kind of the de facto headquarters of the organization. There are other major sites and museums. In fact, there are currently 26 publicly accessible sites across the state, and you can kind of see how they're spread out there. So this is a big and sprawling organization with a staff of maybe 700 that fluctuates based on time of year. And this is what we do. So we've got library and collections. I do want to take a second to point out that yellow and black kind of looks like a Rothko painting there. That's the back door of a school bus that was on the I-35 bridge that collapsed into the river. Every student and every teacher and adult survived, and they've all signed the bus, and that has now been collected by the Historical Society, or at least the door has. We also, as I said, have the historic sites and museums. Historic preservation, both what you might expect in terms of buildings and properties, but also what about digital preservation? That's part of what we need to do as well. Education, you could argue that just about everything we do has an educational component, but we also provide the curriculum for most of the students in the state for the history of Minnesota for 6th grade social studies, both as print and digital. Exhibits and programs, many of them. These are currently some of the things going on at the History Center in St. Paul. And publishing, books, ebooks, apps, direct online publishing. So we're doing a lot of stuff. And currently we have a set of strategic priorities, one of which is content strategy. And this is how that's defined, and give you a couple seconds on that, but I'm going to move on. This is aspirational. We're not necessarily doing this perfectly at this point, but we're heading to this. Because that strategic priority really is a higher level strategy type effort, it has spawned a subgroup that really is the management, the kind of application component of that. And this is what that group is doing. And this group, I should say, is headed by both Jesse and myself. We kind of co-lead this, and we have representatives from across the organization participating in it. We establish best practices, standards, and tools for staff that support agile and efficient content creation in order to create a cohesive public user experience. That, too, is what we aspire to. One of the things that's inspired us is this article from a few years back from A List Apart. The illustration you see shows a visitor, a customer, a user in the midst of many different channels related to a single company or organization. And the article makes some really good points. I'm just going to quote one that I don't think it wound up in the description of this session. But Andy Polaine writes, even if your job ends at the design of a specific channel, your users' experiences don't. Your website or mobile app might be wonderful on its own, but customers experience services in totality and base their judgments on how well everything works together. This means the transitions between channels and over time become crucial. So he, in that article, gives the example of an airline where you might start with looking at flights online and booking your ticket, but then you show up and you check in with a system, and then there's the flight attendants, and there's the whole experience. All of that, you're thinking about this organization, and the point is that if you can kind of create a stronger connection between all these channels, you can strengthen your ability to serve your customers or audience. So these are some of the core issues that we're dealing with in this group. We're looking at, like I've already said, this cohesive public user experience. We produce a lot of stuff, and people can interact with various things. Whether that all fits together for them or not is kind of what we're looking at. We're thinking about formal filtering processes for just what projects kind of go ahead. We have capacity issues, as everyone does. We're looking at systems, much like what Mia was talking about with their enterprise content management system, that could enable people to better find content, create content, reuse content. And we're looking at what's happening with the evolution of staff roles. Is the organization set up in an ideal way, given what the kind of current landscape and opportunities are? We're using this diagram to kind of help illustrate what we're trying to do. Content is the raw materials on the bottom. Then you have the kind of internal user experience supported by systems, supported by standards and things, and then you have your production standards. And ultimately, we put products out there, and they go through many channels, and they can also kind of feed back then and become content for future work as well. These are some of the issues that we are truly struggling with and talking about. Things like what the current possibilities are, what the current demand is relative to our own capacity. That's always an issue. This kind of idea of a centralized process where you might get a certain consistent quality, but you also might get a bottleneck. And you know, this difference between staff autonomy and ability to create their own stuff versus kind of shoving it through these production areas, which kind of goes into the quality-quantity thing. We're not necessarily always trying to balance these things. Some cases we're actually trying to choose one or the other, but these are sort of the dynamics of the conversation. Creating things that are one of a kind, that take a bit of effort and then take an effort to sustain, versus putting your time into building systems that can create other things. This is the biggest one, I think, is our day-to-day work and responsibilities relative to taking the time to invest in something better altogether. What we've done so far is that we have formed a group of people from representing the entire organization, and that group meets monthly. And we created a logic model to start that process with a relatively new staff person who is with us to help us all develop our abilities to evaluate our programs and projects. Logic models are designed to answer this simple question: what are you doing, for whom, and for what purpose or benefit? So this is what, so that led to what I've already read you. That's how we got that sort of purpose statement. The top part of the logic model looks like this. You have inputs, activities, outputs, and then short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. The simple process of putting one of these together can really start to bring people together. A big piece of what's happening right now is what we call mapping. So we're actually looking at digital products, and we have a definition for what that is. It's not anything that digital tools are used to create, but it's anything that gets experienced by the public in some digital medium. And so all of these representatives from across the organization that are participating in this work are out kind of auditing all the stuff that they already have in place, that they're maintaining, things that they're working on, and things that they're planning to do, so that we can put all this stuff together and look at what we as an organization are up to. And that, we don't know where that will lead, but that's going to be kind of the key to where we're going to go next and what issues we're going to try to solve. This is what the sort of tool looks like for that. We're happy to share these things with anybody who might be interested. Just contact Jesse or me. So this gives people a structure to go out and kind of map what's going on right now. And we're also, at least in a few select areas, looking at roles and responsibilities. We're starting with the more production-oriented and media and technology areas, and all of these different types of skills, and figuring out whether they exist or not in certain areas. And then we have kind of a key to how we're marking that up. This is going to also help us kind of see where the skill opportunities and gaps are and things like that. And we're doing as much as we can to learn from other organizations, like coming to conferences and sharing what we're doing, but really listening to what other people are dealing with. We've been connecting with our MIA colleagues recently and other means. and doing as much internal communication as we can so that people are aware of what we're doing and can start participating. So I think that leaves us with a little time to talk, right?
Yeah.